Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today we're going to go back to July 18th, 1863 to Fort Wagner, South Carolina. When I say the words Fort Wagner, you instantly think of Morris Island, Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, Robert Gould Shaw, the movie Glory, the correspondent who wrote a story about how men of color could fight, which disproved some common beliefs that the white population had about African American soldiers fighting for the Union. All of these things are part of the American memory. Another part of the American memory is William Harvey Carney. He is the soldier pictured on the left on the screen here. He was a sergeant in the 54th, and he made the assault up the parapet of Fort Wagner, carrying the national colors, which he picked up at some point along the way. He was wounded multiple times during the fight. He wound up coming back down the parapet, holding the colors, going all the way back across the beach, back to the small remnant of men who survived the attack, and famously said, "Boys, the old flag never touched the ground." And for that, he later in life received the Medal of Honor. The other soldier pictured here is not a name that is familiar to you. He is John, I'm willing to bet he's not familiar to you. He is John Whittier Messer Appleton, who was a merchant in Massachusetts. He started off as a private in the Boston Cadets. He goes on to become a captain in the 54th Massachusetts. He is also there with Carney, makes the charge. Appleton also survives. He's wounded a couple of times. And later on in 1899, he writes an affidavit on behalf of Sergeant Carney's nomination for a Medal of Honor. Deep in the archives of the National Archives is this letter. And it's not particularly long. And I want to read it to you because it speaks to a couple things. It's first and foremost, it's an eyewitness account of one of the most memorable moments of the American Civil War, that assault on Fort Wagner. Even though it failed, it was momentous. It also gives you some of the personal details of what it was like in combat, and you're getting this through an eyewitness account of somebody who was actually there. So I'm going to read this to you now. This is Captain Appleton's affidavit from 1899 about Sergeant Carney. By this time, by the way, Appleton is living in West Virginia. So here we go. State of West Virginia, County of Kanawha. This day personally appeared before me a notary public in and for said county, General J.W.M. Appleton, who, being by me first duly sworn, deposes and says that on the 18th of July, 1863, I was captain commanding a company of the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, and as such, in the line of duty, was in the front line of the attack upon Fort Wagner, Morris Island, Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The regiment was formed for the attack by wing, half the companies in the front line, and the remainder a few paces behind them. The color company was to my left in the front line. As we approached the fort, we broke through some palisading and ran over some rifle pits in which were men of the enemy's forces. And I heard afterwards the color bearer fell at that time. Sergeant William H. Carney, a duty sergeant of C Company, picked up the colors and carried them forward with us in the charge. I was near the colors when they crossed the moat, and they were planted on the top of the curtain of the fort between the two main bastions, some 20 yards to my left as I stood on the top of the rampart. There was severe fighting for me in my front, but I could see that the colors kept rising and falling as the men fought around them. Once I thought they were taken, but Carney hung on to them, and finally, to my great relief, I saw them slowly go down the exterior slope of the rampart and cross the moat. Carney was wounded in 3 places in the fight about the colors. The state flag was torn from its staff and captured. After our long fight in the southeast bastion, which occurred after the time I speak of above, and in which I was wounded twice, I made my way down the beach and found a remnant of the regiment, and Carney had brought the colors to the officer commanding. Carney's action throughout was very heroic. It is, in my opinion, that he well deserves a medal for his deed. John W. M. Appleton, Brigadier General, Adjutant General of West Virginia, subscribed and sworn before me at Charleston, West Virginia, this day of December, 1899. So there you have it. Captain John Appleton, his affidavit supporting the nomination for a Medal of Honor for Sergeant William Harvey Carney, 54th Massachusetts Infantry. Until the next time, we'll see you on Life on the Civil War Research Trail.